Welcome, everybody, to Sunday morning here at Club Fantasy FFL. This is the Dynasty After Party. I'm your fill-in host today, Joshua Hudson. With me, the cog of the Dynasty After Party show, Mr. Joel Wirth. And since it's a look inside season here at Club Fantasy, we decided to extend that to Dynasty. If you're unfamiliar with a look inside, what we are doing is previewing all 32 teams heading into the 2024 season. On no pun intended, on Wednesday, we took a look at the Carolina Panthers, the Washington Commanders, and the Arizona Cardinals as we prepare for redraft. So on today's show, Joel and myself are going to touch on those same three teams heading into Dynasty. So not only are we looking at 2024, but we're looking at 2025 and 2026. So stay tuned. Welcome, everybody. This is the Dynasty After Party here on Sunday morning of Memorial Day weekend. I'm your host, Joshua Hudson. With me, returning to the show, Mr. Joel Wirth. How you doing this morning, Joel?
Good. Glad to be back. Had a trip to Wisconsin for a wedding last weekend, but had a good time. But glad to be back and back in the analyst chair, I guess. Is that my chair?
That's your chair. That is your chair, buddy. That's your chair. Because it's certainly not me, that's for sure. All right, as mentioned in the intro, we're going to be looking at the Carolina Panthers, Washington Commanders, and the Arizona Cardinals as we head into our Look Inside team preview season here at Club Fantasy. But first, what we want to touch on today, a couple of league headlines. Joel, I don't know how much we talked about this last week with Sicoli and special guest Hoove, but let's talk about this. The NFL schedule got released, and as such, bye weeks got introduced. There's some interesting weeks here as fantasy managers try to prepare for their 2024 drafts. And you've made mention of weeks 12 and 14 specifically, because 6 teams are on bye on each and every one of those weeks. I will go through and I will read them off here right now. Week 12 shows the Buffalo Bills. I'm guessing that is the Jets or Giants. It just says New York when I'm looking at the schedule, because fantasy calculator kind of sucks. Cincinnati Bengals, Jets. Okay. The Bengals, the Falcons, the Saints, and the Jaguars. That's week 12. And week 14, we have the Colts, Patriots, Broncos, Washington Commanders, Baltimore Ravens, and the Houston Texans. A lot to go with here. A lot of teams that we hope should have some fantasy relevant players. Let's talk about this, Joel. Thoughts here?
I think the key thing is you list the list of teams. The quarterbacks on those teams are pretty. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jayden Daniels, Drake May. I mean, Bo Nix. I mean, you could have a Superflex team with 3 really solid quarterbacks and be stuck with none on either one of those weeks, because it's just stacked with the elite quarterbacks in both those weeks. So yeah, it's pretty. No other week has 6 teams off. Week 13 in between those teams is Thanksgiving week, so there's nobody off that week. So yeah, it's a bizarre kind of scheduling quirk that the NFL does every year, where they kind of load up these back end weeks with bye teams. I don't really understand. I don't know why, there's multiple weeks with only 2 teams off, why they can't kind of more evenly distribute that. But yeah, you're leading up into the playoffs. You're going to have a couple weeks where almost assuredly one of your quarterbacks in Superflex is going to be off. So kind of crazy.
Yeah, this feels like the first time that I've seen week 13 for Thanksgiving. It always seems like it's week 12, right? Am I crazy?
Yeah, it's early this week because they start early, because Labor Day is super early. So
I don't know. It feels weird. But like there's no bye in week 8. Everybody's playing there in week 8. Everybody's playing in week 13, obviously, with Thanksgiving. 2 teams in week 7. You have 4 and 5 and 6, 2 in week 9. Like, yeah, there's just no real distribution, and it feels kind of weird that you just want to like overload week 12 and then week 14. That kind of every time I think that the NFL cares about fantasy football managers, they go and do something stupid like this. It's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
With it, so
I mean, I don't want to kind of shit on the NFL schedule makers because it's a really hard job, but you would think you could kind of back end this and say, okay, this is too much in those 2 weeks, and just kind of tweak it at the end and say, okay, let's move 2 teams out of there and just have 4 on either week and move a couple of those to an earlier week. But yeah, kind of crazy.
So dumb. All right, let's talk about some OTA notes. A couple of things of note that I see that you've mentioned here in the show sheet, Joel, and I think they're pretty important. We'll start with Kyran Williams. So he's come out with a foot injury that he's been dealing with, and which maybe kind of puts into perspective the Blake Corum selection in the 3rd round of this year's NFL draft. Kyran Williams has dealt with a foot injury previously. Are you worried at all heading into 2024? I don't like. First, I guess let me ask you this: in terms of dynasty value, how are you valuing Kyran Williams?
I think he's been a buy kind of all off season, just because he, like, in that role, like Sean McVay wants to run, one back heavily, and it's a really good offense to be a lead back in. So I think he's been kind of underrated. There's people who didn't like him as a prospect that kind of fade him. There's people who fade him because of the injuries. He had a pretty serious injury last year as well. So I get the fade, but he's someone I want to buy because the upside is still there. And I've been able to buy him for like a fairly cheap price. I got him for 2 seconds in one league. I got him for a very late first in another league. So I've got him at a pretty good price. I'm not super worried about this injury in particular because we've got so much time until the season, until training camp, until the season starts. I'm just worried that this is a potentially reoccurring issue. That was
going to be my next question. Yeah, because he's already dealt with foot problems in the past, and now he's popping up again. So, which is why I wanted to bring up the concept of his dynasty value, because again, we see it with players all the time. Like one injury, then you're dealing with the same type of injury for the same player. It starts to become a snowball effect, right? And it's kind of the same thing that Christian Watson's dealing with, who's kind of the next guy on this list. I love your comment, is asymmetrical. Hamstring issues, first 2 years here in the league. If I'm not mistaken, he dealt with hamstring injuries in college as well. A lot of the research, I guess, that he's doing has kind of led him down this path where I guess like one leg has a higher like body percent fat or something like that, body fat percentage or some weird thing like that. If you have more information, by all means, please talk about it. But I have some thoughts just on Kyran Williams heading into this, or Kyran Williams, excuse me, Christian Watson heading into the season as I've done my projections and research and everything.
Yeah, so basically he went down to Madison at the university. They have a kind of sports injury center that has contracted with the NFL to do specifically hamstring research. So he and Eric Stokes, who's a cornerback, has had some injury issues as well. Both went down there. And they determined that Christian Watson his right leg is 20% weaker, or let's say his left leg is 20% stronger than his right leg. And they think that asymmetry is basically causing compensation issues. It's causing his right leg to kind of overcompensate for the strength differential. And that's why he's having so many hamstring issues. And these hamstring issues have come to the right leg. Both of them last year were on his right leg, the one he suffered in preseason and in the Chiefs game that basically cost him the rest of the regular season. So, so he has basically gone to work on this. He's, specifically targeting his right leg to kind of try and make it even. I think he said he's basically he's gone from 20% asymmetry to 12% asymmetry, wants to get that down to 6 by the time the season starts. Apparently it's like not reasonable to have a 0% asymmetry, to have both legs equally at equal strength, which I guess makes sense. But so I think there's a couple things about Christian Watson that I think are positive. One is that like he is very actively kind of taken a role in his health and staying healthy, right? He talked when he first came back from the hamstring last year, he talked about how he had kind of spent money going to his own doctors in the offseason. So he acknowledges that there's an issue that needs to be fixed. The other is that this is a critical season for Christian Watson, right? This is year 3 of his contract. If he can't stay on the field for a large portion of this season, then his best case scenario going into either renegotiating with the Packers or into free agency is that he has one healthy season. And no matter how good that season is, teams don't pay for one healthy season out of 4. So if he wants any kind of long-term security, if he wants any kind of guaranteed money, big money coming off his rookie deal, he has got to perform this year. He's got to stay on the field. So that's a motivation. So I think he understands that there's a problem. That's a good thing. He's actively trying to fix that problem. And he has extreme motivation, monetary motivation to stay on the field and to be kind of the player that we think he can be. We know he can be, that he's shown that he can be, and to do it, to actually stay on the field and be able to do it.
Yeah, right now he's on the Devontae Parker, DJ Chark path to fantasy relevancy. One solid season, and then that's what everybody remembers, and he keeps getting those 1-year prove-it deal contracts. So, I don't know. I don't want to say I'm bullish on Christian Watson, but when I went through and did my first round of projections, I'm going to tweak him later this week. He ended up as my wide receiver 19. I do have him as the highest target earner on the Packers, 127 to Jayden Reed's 115. I think if both of those guys are healthy for the majority part of the season, I think those are the top 2 options in that Packers offense. Joel, would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, very much so. And if Watson can stay healthy, he's the guy that offense runs to, right? He is the one who can stretch defense. He's the most important receiver in that offense because he can stretch defenses. He can do those deep crosses. He's a red zone target. He gets those. He's important for the offense. He's important for fantasy players because it gets those very high value touches. So yeah, he's the one that they want on the field most of all. He will be in all receiver sets. To where the other guys I don't know will be as much.
Yeah, Jayden Reed didn't run near as many routes last year. His snap percentage was a lot lower when all 3 of Watson, himself, and Dobbs were all on the field because they mostly played him out of the slot. Dobbs playing sort of that Z role, whereas Watson playing the X. So it makes sense from that perspective, although I do think that Dobbs will ultimately be the odd man out, I guess, just from a target perspective. But I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. Of course, we'll get to the Packers few episodes down the road. So, but today we're taking a look inside from a dynasty aspect of the Carolina Panthers, the Washington Commanders, and the Arizona Cardinals. But before we get into this, I want to talk about something brand spanking new that has graciously fallen into Club Fantasy's lap, and that is a sponsorship with Dynasty Nerds. Yes, Dynasty Nerds, Garrett, Jared, Rich, all those guys, absolutely fantastic work they do. You can go to dynastynerds.com. You can sign up for any of their memberships, annual, monthly. At checkout, use promo code Club Fantasy. You will save 15% off of your Dynasty Nerds purchase. You will have access to their All-22 film room, their private Discord channel, their trade calculator, which, I don't know, we may use a little bit later down the road. We'll see how everything goes with talking about the the teams and if we have time to get into it. But all the tools that they have, rankings, etc., all available at dynastynerds.com. At checkout, use promo code Club Fantasy. Save 15%. Help us keep the lights on here, guys. Come on. You get a lot of great assets over there, and you can do a lot of cool things on our side as well. So
I'll say real quick.
Talk about go ahead.
Just the prospect film room is worth the price of the subscription by itself. I mean, that's
100%.
That's what I primarily use for prospect scout. If you go to YouTube and just watch highlight videos, you don't see what you need to see out of these kids. So yeah, that prospect film was really good. So yeah, I subscribe and I use it just for primarily for that. It's worth it just for that.
100% agree. All right, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. So we've got a brand new coaching staff. It's going to be a little interesting to see how everything plays out. We have Dan Morgan, first season as the GM. He's a former linebacker of the team, has spent a lot of his retirement in front offices, scouting, learning the ropes. He gets his first crack at the GM job. His first hire, so to speak, head coach and now the play caller, Dave Canales, former offensive coordinator with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, former quarterback coach with the Seattle Seahawks. He has gone through and resurrected the careers of one Geno Smith as well as Baker Mayfield. After a tumultuous rookie season, he is now tasked with doing the same thing for former number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. Speaking of Bryce Young, let's talk about some of these relevant dynasty players here on the Carolina Panthers. At quarterback, previously mentioned Bryce Young. He's only 23. He's heading into year 2. They've got a very interesting running back room. Obviously, the holdovers, you have Chuba Hubbard heading into the final season of his rookie contract. He's 25. The big free agent acquisition from a year ago, Miles Sanders, near and dear to my heart as a former Eagle. He's 27 heading into year 2 of his 4-year contract. Has a $7.5 million cap hit and was appropriately replaced by Chuba Hubbard last year because whether Sanders just stopped being good or that offense was just a shitstorm of chaos, one will never know, I guess. But the team went out and said, you know what? Our running back room sucks, and we're going to spend a second-round draft pick on a 21-year-old running back out of Texas coming off of an ACL injury, that being Jonathon Brooks. The receivers, another high-priced free agent acquisition from a year ago, Adam Thielen will be 34 years old heading into the second year of his 3-year deal. Has an $8 million cap hit. The rookie standout, or well, quote-unquote standout from last year, saw 83 targets, but didn't really catch very many of them. That would be Jonathan Mingo, the second-round pick from 2023, second year of his rookie contract. They brought in Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He will be 28 this season. This is the final year of his contract. And then, of course, they traded into the back part of the first round to get the 5th-year option on one Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. So he will be 23 heading into his rookie season. And then they spent a 3rd-round pick on tight end Jatavian Sanders out of Texas, 21 years old. All right, Joel, give me your top 3 dynasty assets from this team. Doesn't necessarily have to be the youngest, but give me the dynasty assets from this team.
So I've said before on the show that I think Bryce Young is the biggest winner out of anyone from the fantasy-wise from the free agent season, just because of what the Saints did, or the Panthers did to kind of buttress the interior of their offensive line, signed Robert Hunt, and to go out and get some receivers who can make his life easier. I mean, last year it was you talked about Jonathan Mingo getting 83 targets. Those were some useless freaking targets. Adam Thielen was really the only reliable receiver they had. They get Deontay Johnson, who's a very good kind of Z receiver who can, he can get open. Whether he can catch the ball or what he does with it beyond that is an open issue, but he can get open, and that's what Bryce Young needs more than anything is some guys who can get open. You talked about Canales being kind of a quarterback whisperer. The one thing he's had in both of those stops is a kind of very physical kind of boundary X receiver with DK Metcalf, Mike Evans. That's the role Xavier Legette's going to have to play. So he's not only going to get opportunity, he's critical to them succeeding. And obviously Canales wants to win right away. They have to be better than they were last year. So I think
he's really not going to be hard to do. Let's be real.
It's a very low bar, yes. But I think kind of regardless of what you think about Legette as a prospect, you have to take him seriously as a player in this offense because he's going to be so important to them, to their offensive success, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wasn't the highest on Xavier Legette heading into the draft, but if the team is going to trade into the first round to draft him to kind of secure that 5th-year option, I think that's when we as dynasty managers kind of need to look at it and say, all right, we need to take this pick seriously, right? Sure, there's going to be guys that win in the second round, your Ladd McConkeys, your Keon Coleman's, that ideally probably look better from a prospect perspective. Maybe they land in, better situations with better quarterbacks, which ultimately push them ahead of Legette heading into those rookie drafts. But, if you're trying to talk yourself into, say, a Troy Franklin in Denver to go over Legette, your process is wrong. Let's be real here. Okay. So I'm with you on Legette. The thing that worries me a little bit is that while he's size-wise from a weight perspective in that similar range to that boundary X like an Evans and a Metcalf, he's not near as tall. He's only 6'1". No. So that's where like the profile doesn't fully sync up to me, but he has a really good contested catch rate. I think he caught about 47.3% contested catch rate in college last year with Spencer Rattler. And again, and I talked about this on Wednesday, that's what you need when you're dealing with a young quarterback that really doesn't have a problem throwing the football. For a rookie, he had almost 33 pass attempts last year, which is really solid. And considering the offense that he was in last year, woof. So now they've got the guard play. They're protecting him up front. If those guards stack up, then I think that, having a guy like Deontay Johnson that can separate, get open quickly, a guy like Xavier Legette who can go up and catch the football in traffic. And then, of course, you have the veteran Adam Thielen, who's always had a really solid catch percentage over the years. I think those are three reliable pieces that for Bryce Young, can help him take that next step, right?
Yeah, and you talked about Legette's contested catch rate. Like, I think we need to emphasize that more because his targets from Spencer Rattler. Like, the thing I hated about Spencer Rattler was that every time he threw a deep ball, it floated. Like, there was no zip on it whatsoever. So that's a very high degree of difficulty when he can't put velocity on deep balls for Legette to be catching those deep targets. So I think it's even more impressive than the straight percentage would say. So yeah, he's a guy I like. And I just think this offense is just going to be much better. From an overall aspect, I mean, the coaching should be much better. The play calling should be much better. The running game should be much better. I mean, has anyone ever gotten more mileage out of one kind of elite college season in a defense optional conference than Chuba Hubbard has? Ever in the history of the league? Has one guy ever turned one good college season into a 4-year? He's done nothing in the pros. He's just done nothing really in college beyond that first season at Oklahoma State. So, yeah, so I like Jonathon Brooks quite a bit. Hopefully he's healthy, but I think I've compared him to Breece Hall. I said he was Breece Hall without the kind of tenure that Breece Hall had at Iowa State. But they're very similar players. So if he can come off that knee injury, I think he's going to get a lot of work if they can give it to him. Miles Sanders is an afterthought. Sorry. But if he couldn't beat out Chuba Hubbard clearly last year, then what hope does he have of getting on the field this year?
See, and that's my thing. And maybe this is my Miles Sanders bias coming into play, but I don't know so much that he quote unquote didn't beat out Chuba Hubbard. I think it just sort of became, all right, we need some kind of a change, so this is what we're going to go with, right? Like, Sanders was Reich's guy, was Staley's guy. When they ousted Frank Reich, it became, all right, Sanders, you're an afterthought at this point, and we're just going to see what else we have, right? And now that the new coaching staff comes in, they put the onus on, hey, we're going to draft our guy. They go out and they draft Jonathon Brooks. It would not surprise me if Miles Sanders, A, gets traded in sometime in training camp or preseason, or just gets outright cut, right? Because, hey, we'll take the dead cap hit. This is what teams do when new regimes come in. They start looking at the guys that they didn't bring in and say, how do you fit? And Miles Sanders, for whatever ability he's had as a pass catcher, we've seen him actually catch passes and be utilized in the passing game. But then we've also seen him be really bad in the passing game. So is he just the first, second down runner? Does he need an elite offensive line to be good? I think you can make a case for either, truthfully. But if Jonathon Brooks is your guy and he shows in training camp that he's returning well from the ACL, you don't need Sanders at that point. You can run with Brooks and Chuba Hubbard. So cut bait while you can, get ahead of the cap hit, and roll it forward, in my opinion. Because otherwise, he's just wasting away and not being a real part of the rotation.
Yeah, and the thing about Brooks is, I think we made this point before, we expected him to go to like Dallas in the 50s or something like that overall. And he went in the very early second, 36, 35, something like that. So they have to have confidence that he's over the knee injury and going to be ready to go. we've heard, I don't know that it's been confirmed, that it was just an ACL. There wasn't any additional injury mechanism. There was no PCL, no meniscus, anything like that kind of complicates these recoveries. So if that's the case, then hopefully he is, whether he can take a full, 300 carry workload, I doubt. But if he can get 250 touches, including the passing game, then I think that he's in for a very successful season.
All right. I briefly want to touch on Jatavian Sanders here. Thoughts on him coming out and how he can fit into this offense?
So normally in our fantasy tight ends, we want elite athletes, and he just didn't test that well. He was productive at Texas, obviously. But man, that's just as good a landing spot for a tight end as you could hope, right? They
didn't have a great
Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas.
Exactly.
Those guys, two blocking tight ends.
Blockers.
Yeah, exactly. So the opportunity is certainly there. There was some real kind of polarizing aspects to his blocking as a tight end. I thought he was okay, just really kind of structurally poor, just kind of mechanically really bad. His arms would get outside. His hand placement was really bad. And there was some stuff that he would get called on. There would be obvious holds in the pros. So if he can kind of work on that, I think he's a willing blocker. He's okay if his hand placement's okay. So I think he's going to have a role there, especially in the passing game. So, whether he can kind of overcome those athletic limitations, we'll see. Maybe he just had a bad day at the combine. I don't know. But yeah, I like the opportunity.
All right. Quick elevator pitch. On the Carolina Panthers, who's your biggest sell?
We talked about Chuba Hubbard. I think Chuba Hubbard is this year's or next year's version of Rashad Penny, basically. A guy who's kind of gone through his rookie contract and then just goes somewhere else and just disappears.
What could you realistically get for Chuba Hubbard, though? I mean, nobody's throwing a second out there.
No, but I would rather. I think Chuba Hubbard is dead weight. So whatever you can get for him, I would take. If you can get, and like Thielen's 34. So if you can get, like, if you're a rebuilding team and if you can get whatever you can get for Thielen, because this is probably his last year. I can't imagine he comes back at 35 or anyone gives him kind of anything at 35. So that even on a contender, I would kind of get off of him for whatever I could.
All right. Sneaky buy. Not the obvious names, but a name that, you know what, I could take a second or a third, package something together, get him in a throw-in deal. Somebody that maybe is on the cheaper side, might take a year or two.
I think Bryce Young is a legit starting quarterback in Superflex. I'll say that. In one quarterback, I wouldn't be interested, but I think he could end the year as a top 20 fantasy quarterback.
I like it. All right, moving on to the Washington Commanders. Again, new everything. New GM, new ownership, new coach, new play caller, whole 9 yards. Dan Quinn comes in from the Dallas Cowboys to take over as head coach. Adam Peters, the new GM from the San Francisco tree. And then Dan Quinn's biggest hire, offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, formerly of the Arizona Cardinals, head coach from 2019 to 2022. This is going to be an interesting offense, I think, in a lot of ways. They spent the second overall pick on Jayden Daniels, 23-year-old rookie. They signed 29-year-old Austin Ekeler to be a part of the tandem at running back paired with Brian Robinson. They will be flanked by second-year running back Chris Rodriguez Jr. Then, of course, the holdovers at wide receiver. Terry McLaurin is in the third year of a 4-year deal. I did not realize Terry McLaurin was 29 years old. Holy
He's going to be. He will turn 29 in September.
Okay.
In September.
Jahan Dotson.
This is his age 29 season.
Whew, man. Jahan Dotson, 24, third season in the league. Rookie Luke McCaffrey was the final pick of the third round. Zach Ertz, they signed to a 1-year deal. He's 34. And then, of course, the tight end that everybody wants to talk about, Ben Sinnott, the rookie, 21 years old out of Kansas State. All right. Same thing, Joel. Let's talk. 3 biggest assets here from a dynasty perspective.
One is obviously the quarterback. So if we talk about, you said this is going to be a very interesting offense, and I think it will be too. If you look at what Kingsbury did in Arizona, he had a very similar quarterback in Kyler Murray to what we expect Jayden Daniels to be. And like James Conner was just, whenever he was out there, he was just exceptionally effective and productive. And I think the most similar back to Conner in this offense is Austin Ekeler. So as much as people just want, as much as people just want to move on from him, like if he can stay healthy, I think he's got that kind of Conner in Arizona during Kingsbury years upside. I think he can go back to being a really productive player. And then Terry McLaurin, I just don't like. Yeah, we talked about the age and how he's surprisingly old, but he's just the best receiver they have by far. It's not close. So I'm not interested in Jahan Dotson. I fell for that trap last year. I'm moving on. He talked about Sinnott. Sinnott's an H-back. So if you want to spend a second round rookie pick on an H-back, go nuts. Have fun.
Yeah, I understand the concept of, he fell in a great situation. Zach Ertz is old. I got to get me all the Ben Sinnott. I get it from that perspective. But I just every time I look at him, I'm like, all right, we're talking about Josiah DeGuara. That's what I see. That's
better
what I see.
Josiah DeGuara. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's not quite Kyle Juszczyk, but better than Josiah DeGuara. And even then, are you rushing to start Kyle Juszczyk in any of your dynasty leagues? Exactly. So I'm not...
Interestingly, amongst Packers Twitter, that was kind of the talk that Ben Sinnott was better Josiah DeGuara.
All right, so I'm not crazy here.
No, not at all.
Oh man, the things that dynasty managers talk themselves into. All right, I do want to touch on this Austin Ekeler thing because you brought it up, and I'm 100% on board with this because I think that we're overlooking just the fact that he's 29 years old. And he's now on a second team, but when you look at how Kingsbury runs his offense, it's running backs right up the gut inside the 5, right? They score a ton of touchdowns. I went over this on Wednesday, no pun intended. And you can also find a separate breakdown because we broke them down into 3 specific teams. That's all here on the website, youtube.com/ClubFantasyFFL. So when you look at red zone efficiency and usage, Austin Ekeler is so much better at this than Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson is not a good red zone threat. Doesn't score that many touchdowns. From 2021 to 2022, Austin Ekeler scored 30 rushing touchdowns inside the red zone. 30. And that was with an offensive coordinator who called plays that loved running the football inside the red zone. Oh, wait. What does Cliff Kingsbury like to do? Run the football inside the 5. Are we sleeping on Austin? This feels like a very cheap win now dynasty buy, in my opinion.
I'm not, but I think the community at large is. Yeah. If you look at Ekeler last year, he had that high ankle sprain in week 1. I don't think he ever recovered from that. And maybe by the time he did, then Justin Herbert was hurt and the offense was trash anyway. So I think that affected him the entire year. So, obviously he's not Austin Ekeler at 29 is not what Austin Ekeler at 25, 26 was, but I still think he's the best option for this team. And if you look at it, if you look at the moves that they've made since Dan Quinn took over, they brought in Ekeler, they brought in Bobby Wagner. Sorry. They are bringing in veteran guys who can install a culture and that they can compete with now. I think they see an opening, right? Philly's vulnerable, at least defensively. They're turning over their coordinators again. Dallas is super vulnerable. They've done nothing this offseason. The Giants are the Giants. I think they're looking at this as an opportunity. I think they legitimately think they can win their division.
I agree. And again, talked about it on Wednesday because we were looking at future bets. They're plus 750 to win the NFC East. Washington is. I don't think that's a terrible bet, honestly.
I think it's a great bet.
Yeah. So, I'm with you 100%. And my biggest thing with Ekeler, and again, finish my projections first round, I have Ekeler as top 12 running back this year. So again, I think he's a very win now mode, go buy Austin Ekeler. I think he's a great value. Obviously he's older, so he's not going to cost you near as much, but I think that the slot wide receiver role is very much up for grabs in this offense. You're talking about, Luke McCaffrey, who really has only been playing wide receiver for a couple years, still very raw. Outside of McLaurin and Dotson, who it's very up for grabs, the third target in the pecking order, right? Tell me why that isn't Austin Ekeler.
I mean, I can't. I do like McCaffrey some, just because, like you said, he's kind of raw and he tested really well. He's kind of an elite athlete. So I think there's some upside there. But I think Ekeler, like we said, I don't believe in Sinnott as a receiving target. So, and I don't believe at all in Zach Ertz. So yeah, I absolutely think Eckler's the third, probably the third leading receiver, maybe the second. He could be their second leading receiver. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
All right. So now we're going to move on to the biggest sell.
I think it has to be McLaurin. I don't know how he's kind of escaping that age cliff in dynasty value that we've seen others like Calvin Ridley, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams.
Well, look, Calvin Ridley just got a 4-year deal at 30 years old.
But his dynasty value, I mean, obviously a different situation coming off the suspension, but his dynasty value has not recovered at all. So I think once people kind of come to grips on how old Terry McLaurin is and how late he came into the league, how old he was when he came into the league, there's just not going to be much appetite to buy him. So I think now is kind of the opportunity to move off of him before kind of people realize how old he is.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a case of get out even if it's a year early, right?
Yeah.
I think exactly. McLaurin's going to be fine this year. I don't think he's going to be anything terrible, but you're still looking at a guy that we've all been hoping would be a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy, and just he's never been that. He's barely been a top 15 wide receiver on occasion. So, and I know a lot of that is just, shoddy quarterback play, and, maybe Jayden Daniels fixes that, and that's probably where a lot of the 2024 hype around Terry McLaurin lies. But to me, he's name value. That's what he is. He's not production value. So get out while you can. And you know what? If he pops this year, that's okay.
Yep.
I would leave it at that. Heading into the final year of his deal at 30 years old in 2025, there's a good chance that Washington probably uses a first or second round pick next year on a wide receiver. And Joel, you watch a lot more college ball than myself, so you can probably attest to this. Wide receiver class is pretty damn good next year too. They'll have an opportunity to get a future wide receiver one to take over for Terry McLaurin. So, changes teams at 31 years old. I think it has sell written all over it. All right, the sneaky buy. I have a feeling I know where you're going with this, but
to me, it's Chris Rodriguez because he's the exact same player as Brian Robinson. Chris Rodriguez and Brian Robinson are the exact same player. So if Robinson gets hurt, Chris Rodriguez is going to kind of fall into that kind of early down plotter role that Robinson kind of takes up. And he took over for Robinson last year and he was effective. I mean, I know these guys, this administration didn't draft him, but he was productive last year when he got an opportunity at the end of the year. So I think if anything happened to Robinson, he would kind of just take over those snaps kind of seamlessly. So for someone you don't have to give up literally anything except a roster spot to acquire, I think he's someone I want to have kind of on the back end of my roster.
I was going to say, I have one, it's a 10-team Superflex. It's kind of shallow rosters, though. It's only like 20 or 22 roster spots. I ended up having to drop Chris Rodriguez because I had so many draft picks in this rookie draft in 2024 that I just didn't have the room for him.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to keep him because I'm like, all right, Roshan, Chris Rodriguez, who do I think should really have the more value? I'm like, all right, I'll stick with Roshan. So he was kind of the odd man out. But yeah, I wanted to hold on to Rodriguez literally for all those points. I thought you were going to go with Luke McCaffrey just because, again, the third passing option in this offense is very much up for grabs. But again, you're talking about a young quarterback, a lot of rushing upside. Is there going to be enough room for a third target to actually have any type of value? But when we talk about the Terry McLaurin dynasty value, I think there's room for McCaffrey to have some value in year 2 or year 3, depending on what route they take at wide receiver. Do they think that Jahan Dotson can be the one? Is he a nominal 2? Obviously, this organization didn't draft him, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of things in the air. So I 100% get that, and I think you're right on the trail there with Chris Rodriguez being the sneaky buy here.
The one thing about McCaffrey that I think could be interesting is like Jayden Daniels made a lot of hay throwing to Malik Neighbors in the slot last year, kind of deep slot fades, and I think McCaffrey could do that. So I think there is some upside there. I still don't think the target volumes give me enough to really support any kind of breakout. So I don't know that his value is gonna escalate much above what it is right now.
I mean, unless you already said you're out on Jahan Dotson, maybe McCaffrey becomes that number 2.
No, that's entirely possible, but I don't think the team is out on Dotson yet. I think they're going to give him every opportunity to kind of be that number 2 receiver.
All right, fair enough. As we move on to the Arizona Cardinals, look, the staff stayed the same. Oh my God, it's crazy.
That's a first.
Monty Osenfurt heading into year 2 at GM. Jonathan Gannon, head coach, year 2. Play caller Drew Petzing, year 2. This is, I think, again, another team with some pretty solid options here, because Kyler Murray at quarterback has both been flying under the radar, but subsequently being hyped up to a crazy amount. And personally, I don't know where I fit. I actually traded Kyler Murray in one of my leagues, and I'm fairly certain I went out and acquired him in another one. But there's a lot of discrepancy, I think, with his value, which we'll get into here in a second. But he's 27, heading into year 3 of the 7-year deal that he signed. He's probably going to be there for the next couple of years. $75 million cap hit, or dead cap hit, for 2024, $40 million dead cap for 2025. Then, of course, you have the running back tandem. James Conner heading into the final season of his deal. He's 29. Trey Benson, whom they drafted this year, 22. And then, of course, the big dog, the newly minted wide receiver 1 and top 5 dynasty wide receiver, hasn't played a single snap, Marvin Harrison Jr., 21-year-old rookie. They have Michael Wilson, 24-year-old second-year player. They brought in Zay Jones on a 1-year deal after he was released post-draft by the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is 29. They, of course, also re-signed Greg Dortch. And then the hotshot third-year tight end, Trey McBride, with a massive breakout in 2023. Those would be your top options here. All right, let's look at it, Joel. Give me your top 3 guys here for the Cardinals.
Before we do that, I want to get your opinion as an Eagles fan on Jonathan Gannon, because I know you were down on him after the Super Bowl, and then he got the job there. I thought they were kind of pluckier than they had any reason to be last year, especially early in the year when Dobbs was taking over for quarterback before Kyler Murray got back from the knee injury. I thought that team kind of overachieved. So I want to get I know you were down on Gannon. I want to get your opinion on him in his first year as head coach in Arizona.
They played really for the head coach. I think that's the most uneducated way I could say that, because that sentence really didn't come out the way that I wanted it to. But they were scrappy at times. They didn't give up. And I think that anytime you have a young head coach that can truly motivate your team and your players to continue to fight even when all things look lost, that's a good thing. I think my biggest thing with Gannon is maybe he connects better with younger players than veteran players. And that's really what you saw in Philly. It was a team full of veterans, full of veteran leaders. And when they're used to playing a certain way and their coach is calling games not in a certain way, tends to frustrate those players, right? When they're saying, yo, you needed to call this. Why did you call that? And then you start getting the butting of heads. And it really showed in that Super Bowl, because, my God, that defensive scheme was awful. So it was very unsurprising to me that Philly fans were all about getting rid of Jonathan Gannon and wishing the Cardinals best of luck, because that's, God bless it. Of course, things really got worse, so the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So hopefully Vic Fangio does things better here. But it's pretty clear to me that Osenfort, Gannon, Petzing, the rest of the defensive staff and coaching staff in general, they're working on a culture change here. And you saw it right away with the immediate trade request of Budda Baker, right? The veteran player on this team coming in. Ultimately, he did not get moved. Budda's heading into the final year of his deal, but he seems to have bought in. And I think anytime you can get the veteran leader of the team to buy in, that's a good thing, right? Kyler spent half the year out. By all accounts, did just fine by the end of the year. They're building around Kyler, right? Gannon has bought into Kyler. Osenfort, Petzing, they've bought into Kyler. James Conner, Kyler, going out to basketball games together, shooting hoops, etc., right? The veterans here are buying in. So now it becomes, all right, we got to find the rookies that are going to fit with what we want to do. Well, did a pretty damn good job here with Marvin Harrison Jr. That's the guy. Kyler needs a true number one. So now you've got two top targets here, Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride. I'm kind of excited. I mean, this is very much about, an extension of that Cleveland system, which is the wide receiver 1, the tight end 1. Those are going to be your top options. So it's going to be interesting to me to see a full year of Kyler and the upside of this offense, because to me, this offense isn't high touchdown upside volume, but there's still a lot of things to like. And that's where when I talk about being very indifferent on Kyler, that's kind of where that comes from. But I think they're on the right track with Gannon, as weird as that is for me to say.
Yeah, I remember last year when the video was going around on Twitter of that speech he gave to the team, and this is the least inspiring speech I've seen of all time. That team played for him. I think they played for him, and it's
the same thing that Nick Sirianni had in Philly his first year, right?
Same situation.
First press conference, and you're just like, my God, what? This is like Adam Gase following the freaking things in the press conference, like looking like he's a freaking bozo and has no idea what he's doing. Like, yeah. So I think Gannon's got a chance to be a pretty good head coach. So let's get to the team. Kyler Murray, like you said, I think if you value him at like QB8, which is where he's always like when he plays a full season, he just always ends up as like QB8. I think you're probably okay. He doesn't have the upside to hit that top tier with Hurts and Allen, but he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. There's just no way around it, assuming he stays healthy. And we brought up the dead cap hits. They are not trading him. It's not going to happen. They are pot committed with him. So that's where their investment lies. See, my thing with Kyler is everybody wants to tout the rushing upside. He's had one elite rushing season. Well, let me rephrase that, because I believe he had over 800 yards his rookie year. But he did have, I think it was his second year, he had like 1,100 rushing yards, but has completely fallen off a cliff from a rushing aspect since then. And he wasn't a great passer those years, so he became better throwing when he wasn't running as much. So now it becomes like, hey, if you think you're getting a great quarterback, maybe that great quarterback doesn't have the rushing upside that you think he does.
Like Kyler reminds me more of like peak Russell Wilson than Lamar Jackson. He's better. He's better at like scrambling and creating time for himself than he is as a runner like Lamar. He's not that kind of elite running back playing quarterback that Lamar Jackson is. He's more of I'm going to get back. You're not going to be able to catch me in the pocket, or I'm going to be able to scramble, create passing opportunities for my receivers downfield by creating time for myself, and then kind of chucking the ball downfield. So that I think Marvin Harrison is just going to be spectacular as a rookie. I mean, I think he could not blow away Jamar Chase, because that's not even reasonable, but I think he could surpass Jamar Chase as a rookie. He's just got that kind of upside in that system. Like you said, this is a very Cleveland system. You look at where Cleveland's been the last couple of years. It's been Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and that's really it. That's all you care about for fantasy. I think this team's going to be the exact same thing. I think it's going to be Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, the quarterback. There's obviously going to be value in Connor and Benson, whoever, as long as Connor stays healthy, that's his job. But Benson's kind of the heir apparent. And I think more so
Benson is also going to see plenty of run. I mentioned this already in this segment. This is an extension of that Cleveland offense, right? Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both coexisted with each other. That can very well be the case here with Connor and Benson, at least for 2024.
And Connor misses 4 games every year. That's just
there you go.
Clockwork. So, not projecting injury, but it's the way it is. He's just going to miss time, and he's going to be. I think at this stage of his career, you have to use him like the Packers did with Aaron Jones. You cannot give him bell cow level carries. He just can't handle it. So, I agree with you. I think there's going to be a role for Benson, even if it's not super fantasy viable. I shouldn't say viable. Super fantasy top end role, but I think there is going to be a role. There's definitely going to be weeks where you want to have him to start because he's going to have opportunities and he's got a high floor.
So I think my biggest thing for this offense, especially when trying to project Kyler Murray. Yes, we talked about they're going to feed Marvin Harrison. They're going to feed Trey McBride. To me, those are really your 3 biggest dynasty assets here. Where else is he throwing the football? And I think that to me lies the touchdown upside, right? Because unless you're telling me that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have 15 touchdowns and Trey McBride's going to have 10, I don't see a world where Kyler Murray has 27, 28 touchdowns, which seems to be how people are projecting him when talking about not only his 2024 value, but also his dynasty value going forward.
But I think he could be like, he could have like 25 passing touchdowns and 7-8 rushing touchdowns.
He's had one season more than 5 rushing touchdowns.
Agreed. I think he's got that upside though. I think that's where you could kind of make up that on kind of point scoring on the back end.
So, all right. So talk to me about Michael Wilson then, because to me, that's where the other touchdowns are coming, right?
Yeah. This guy I like.
Are you in on Wilson or?
I liked him quite a bit coming out of Stanford. The knock on him was, can he stay healthy? Because he never did at Stanford at all. And he didn't last year either. But I think he's clearly the number 2 in this offense. We didn't get anything out of Zay Jones last year. I don't expect anything this year, but he's a guy like, I think he got compared to Devontae Adams because he's not Devontae Adams level of talent, but he's got the kind of footwork that can get him open at the line where he can just kind of beat defenders off the line with his footwork and his moves there. So I think he's got the best chance to be the 3rd receiver in this offense. Whether that turns into anything, I don't know. But he's a guy like you talked about. I've traded for Michael Wilson, or I've traded for Kyler Murray. I've traded Kyler Murray away. That's kind of where I am with Michael Wilson. I've traded for him in teams that need kind of some wide receiver depth, and I've moved him on teams that don't. So he's got some value in the community. It's not a lot, but you can move him, you can pick him up, you can acquire him, or you can move him if you need to.
Okay. So obviously this is a pretty centralized team, right? There's only a few cogs that I think you really want. Who's your biggest sell?
I don't really want to sell anyone on this team. Maybe, if I wasn't competing, then obviously Connor, because I don't think he has much of a role beyond the season, and he's going to be more valuable to, like, if I'm not competing, I don't want those points on my team, and I don't think there's any future there. So, but otherwise, man, I think this team is kind of underrated, and I want to acquire Trey McBride, and we'll talk about that in a second. Because I think he's underpriced, but yeah, there's really no one I want to kind of get rid of on this team. If I'm contending, I want parts on this team.
All right. Your sneaky buy.
I think it's McBride because I don't think people value him the way he should be. Like, he should be valued as a tight end. I would value him as high as I would LaPorta.
Okay. Where do you have him then in your tiers? Because I know you don't do like specific rankings, but I know that you put out your tight end tier rankings, which of course you can find over at clubfantasyffl.com. Shameless plug.
Like, to me, it's still Kelsey because I think he's far and away the most valuable tight end. production-wise on a year-to-year basis. I have McBride right with LaPorta in that next group, above Andrews, above Kittle, obviously, above Kyle Pitts. I think he should be valued exactly as LaPorta should be.
Okay, I dig it. Gator mentions that McBride right now is tight end 3 in best ball. We were talking about this, I believe it was on Wednesday. He's going right about the 501 in best ball drafts, 12 team. That's kind of where I am, honestly. Like I would much rather have McBride over Kincaid in Dynasty. Let's see, where do I have him for 2024 in my rankings? He's my tight end 4 for 2024. So like I still have Kelsey, Andrews, Ingram ahead of him, but I have him over Kincaid, LaPorta, Pitts, Njoku, Bowers, Hawkinson. Like I have him ahead of all of those guys just for this year. And a lot of that is, based on the offense. But unless this offense completely changes, he's going to be in the exact same role, the exact same type of target share for the next 3 years. So I don't know how that's not a top 3 dynasty tight end, in my opinion.
Agreed. And when you talk about best ball, I think LaPorta has gotten kind of an artificial bump because of that Week 17 game against the Niners. And I think all Lions and Niners kind of have gotten a bump because of that, because it's a Monday night game. Man, if you don't have pieces of that game, you are going to be sweating Week 17. So in your dynasty championships, in your best ball playoffs, like that's the Monday night game. You are going to be sweating that Monday all day long if you don't have anything going on in that game. So I think that's why LaPorta's got, like I said, an artificial bump in best ball. I think I still think he's a bit overvalued in Dynasty. I think he should be right with McBride. I still think Kelsey's the most valuable, like I said, just because he is the best bet in any given year to be the tight end 1, just because the offense he's in, he's not going away, right? He's not aging out.
He just signed a 2-year extension. So
exactly. So yeah, he's not going anywhere. He's not going to retire anytime soon. I've said in this program a million times, if he plays a couple more years, he has a chance to pass all of Tony Gonzalez's records and be the number 1 statistical tight end of all time. So like his Hall of Fame case is guaranteed already, but he could be easily go down as kind of the number 1 tight end ever. So I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon.
Cool. All right. I'm going to bring up this user question here from CJ, mostly because he's paying us to, and greatly appreciate that.
You, CJ.
For everybody else in the chat, always use that super chat function. We'll greatly appreciate, tips for our advice. So let's talk about the 106 in a 1 quarterback league. Joel, who are you taking, assuming Xavier Worthy is off the board? And I think even if he were on the board, this may not change for you. Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., or mystery player C. Who would you take at 106 in a 1 quarterback rookie draft?
I would take Brian Thomas Jr. I just don't know what the ceiling is for Ladd McConkey. I think there's volume. I don't see a kind of elite ceiling. And I think that Jacksonville offense is really underrated. I think Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence is going to be a really good pairing, especially with kind of Ingram and Kirk to kind of take attention underneath. I think he's going to be able to kind of run the deep. Again, I've compared him. I think he's Christian Watson without the hamstrings. I think that's just a very valuable. He's going to get those high value touches. I think he's going to be an end zone threat, red zone threat. I think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. So I just think Thomas, even though the volume, I would expect McConkey to get more volume. I think Thomas is going to get more valuable touches, and I think he'll be more efficient and kind of high end, better high end asset.
Yeah, my thing with Ladd, I think everybody is just like, oh my God, he's going to a team that has no competition, which again, completely understand that. And I think a lot of that really depends on how you personally feel about Quentin Johnston, because Josh Palmer's a dog and he's played really well in the times when they've needed him to play well because of injuries to Keenan Allen, injuries to Mike Williams. I don't know, he's not going to be a wide receiver 1. But you know what? I don't even think Ladd McConkey is a wide receiver 1. You're talking about their patchworking this wide receiver core, even including Ladd McConkey into this, right? You've got 3 like 1B options at best, in my opinion, in Quentin Johnston, Palmer, and Ladd McConkey. Brian Thomas Jr. has the chance to be a legitimate wide receiver 1. And to me, you want to chase that upside. So I would take Brian Thomas Jr. here. Of course, if Worthy's there, that's my pick, because I just love the kid. I think that, same reason why you have Travis Kelce as your tight end 1. That's why he's at worst a wide receiver 4 in this class for me, is because he has all the upside in the world. And a lot of it has to do with the offense that he's in, but he's also really talented from a skill perspective. So that would be my pick here, would be Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., then Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, I think McConkey's ceiling is basically what Adam Thielen did last year, which is a very high volume, but very kind of low efficient. It'll be efficient. It's just low production kind of value season. I don't think there's a lot of touchdown upside there. I don't think there's a lot of yardage upside. So I think he'll probably get a lot of catches, but I don't know that he'll do a lot with them.
I agree. All right. So speaking of dynasty drafts here, let's go into the Do Better Trades of the Week. And since we didn't get this added till really late, I didn't get a chance to copy and paste it, so we have a nice little banner. But because we're talking trades, let's bring this up one more time. Head over to dynastynerds.com. Sign up for one of their memberships. You can do annual or monthly. Enter promo code CLUBFANTASY. Save yourself 15% on that membership because you love us and you want to help us continue to grow. But more importantly, Dynasty Nerds has all the freaking tools that you need to be fantastic Dynasty managers. We can give you all the advice in the world. We don't have a lot of tools, really any, honestly, because we're not that well established. Dynasty Nerds, however, very well established. They have a trade calculator that you can use as part of these tools that you sign up for with their memberships, as well as their all-22 film room, which will help you in your rookie drafts every single summer. That is what you want to do some scouting for yourself. Access that all-22 film room. It is 1,000% worth every single penny of your Dynasty Nerds subscription. Once again, go to dynastynerds.com. Use promo code CLUBFANTASY at checkout. Save yourself 15%. All right, Joel, let's get into the Do Better Trade of the Week. I'm going to go ahead and read this off because, as I mentioned, I didn't get a chance to put this in the chat. All right, it's a 12-team Superflex non-tight end premium start 10. Anthony Richardson and the 209 for Jalen Hurts. First off, which side are you taking? Let's break it down.
I was offered Hurts for Richardson and the 209.
Okay.
I love Anthony Richardson, but I feel like this is just a smash accept.
For Hurts?
Yes.
Okay.
I've said a couple weeks ago, I said Anthony Richardson has a chance to be the most valuable Superflex Dynasty asset. You don't have to squint too hard to see that outcome. Jalen Hurts is basically right there. He is there. He's right there with Josh Allen as the most valuable Superflex asset. So to go from the risk of Richardson, and I love the upside. I see the upside, but the risk is still there, right? We do not know that he can stay healthy. The questions, he didn't play enough games to kind of answer the questions that we had of him about him as a prospect. He only played 4 games and left 2 of them early. So as much as tantalizing as that upside is, the reality is that he's still filled with question marks, and the 209 is really not enough to get up to Jalen Hurts. So I'm smashing the Hurts side.
Oh yeah, I'm taking Hurts on this 100 times out of 100, if I'm being honest, because there's just not, in my opinion, you're going from the unknown, which is still really valuable to a lot of people in Dynasty, to already established. Like, I feel like people are sleeping on Hurts because he had 1 year with a lot of turnovers. How many turnovers did Josh Allen have last year? How many did he have the year before and the year before that? Good quarterbacks tend to turn the football over. It's okay. It happens. He dominates with his legs. Threw for 3,600 yards last year. Passing, not just rushing. So, like, you're getting anything and everything that you think that you need out of, or think that you want out of Anthony Richardson already established in Jalen Hurts. And to tier up, I guess, for just a late second round pick. Yeah, give me that 100 times out of 100. So, all about it.
Hurts is also getting an offensive coordinator who's very quarterback friendly. Kellen Moore.
Correct. Yeah, I found myself when I was going through and doing my Eagles projections for this year, I really had to like rein myself back because I feel like he's going to take a Dak Prescott kind of leap in passing volume, but still going to maintain that high rushing touchdown upside.
The goal line roll.
Exactly. And that to me is still immensely valuable. So, I mean, I don't know that he's going to hit the 30 passing touchdowns, which is fine. But if he has 10 rushing touchdowns, okay.
10 feels like his floor.
Exactly my point. Like the last 2 years, he's been double-digit touchdowns. So, if this were Richardson in a first, I might maybe hesitate a little.
You'd have to think about
it. It's the 209. Like this is an easy Jalen Hurts side for me. Very easy. Easy. All right. Next trade. Say, a little different. 12-team Superflex tight end premium start 10. Tua, Drake London, and Cade Otton for Caleb Williams and Josh Downs.
So I have the Tua, London, and Otton side, and I was offered Caleb and Josh Downs for them.
Okay.
I think I was going to accept it, but I can't because the guy's roster's not legal. So he's got to go cut a few guys before this trade can go through. I like Drake London quite a bit. I'm also this is a bit of a portfolio play. I'm probably overexposed. And if I want to move London, if I want to get off him in a few spots, using him to upgrade a quarterback is what I probably want to do in Superflex. So, and I think just the value, I think there's a decent chance that Tua outproduces Caleb Williams this year. I think it's probably a pretty good chance, but Caleb Williams is just going to maintain that Dynasty Superflex value way better than Tua will going forward. So I think that's a pretty clear upgrade. And if I look at it, this is Tua and Drake London for the 101 and Josh Downs, which I would do in a heartbeat, pre-draft, right? So I obviously you lose some trade value once this pick becomes a player, but I don't think you're losing that much. Cade Otton doesn't matter in this deal. I don't care about him. So I kind of like Josh Downs. I think he's a little sneaky. So, but again, I'm using London to upgrade my quarter. And I think Caleb Williams is at least a dynasty upgrade. Whether it's a production upgrade is an open question, but I think he's a dynasty upgrade.
Yeah, the Cade Otton part is just kind of a throw-in for me. I'm looking at this as basically Tua, Drake London for Caleb Williams, Josh Downs. Obviously, you're getting the better quarterback in Caleb Williams, bigger downgrade at wide receiver in Josh Downs. But I'm looking at the best piece in this deal, and that's Caleb Williams.
Agreed. So. And I have enough receivers where, I don't necessarily need – I think Drake London is better than my fourth receiver, but I don't need him. I've got other receivers that I can start to where, if Josh Downs becomes a flex, I'm okay with that because I've got other receivers to kind of plug into that Drake London role.
Yeah. All right. I like it. All right. And that wraps things up. Joel, good show, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks for stepping in for Sicoli, who's out doing some actual work covering New York State softball championship tournament. So look forward to having him back next week. And I want to thank Who for stepping in last week while I was gone. Appreciate that, buddy. And we'll see everyone next week.
All right. This has been the Dynasty After Party here on Club Fantasy FFL. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We recently crossed 1,000 subscribers, and we could not have done that without you. But the milestones are not done. Let's make our way to 2,000, guys. And let's get to 2,000 faster than we got to 1,000. That's what I really want to do. You can follow Club Fantasy across the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, here on YouTube at Club Fantasy FFL. The URL is clubfantasyffl.com. As we've been talking about on this entire show, A Look Inside is in full swing. We have articles dropping every single week. 3 of them to be specific, as we cover 3 teams every single week, and then 2 the final week leading up into our Women of Fantasy month of August. It's going to be a great event this year 5, as we support our Galvanized Scholarship, which the first summer boot camp for 2024 for Galvanize takes off right after Memorial Day. So we've got 2 scholarship winners going to the first camp and then 2 going to the rookie camp in second week of June. So really excited about that. Awesome. You can also subscribe to the Women of Fantasy YouTube page, and hint, hint, may have something coming up on there in a couple weeks. Just teasing things,
It's called a teaser,
right? At women_FF on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Always want to support the ladies as we continue to raise awareness and inclusion here of women in sports. So many shows to cover, so many shows. We're skipping Mocking with the Stars tomorrow night, being it's a holiday, but Tuesday, Masterclass with Gator J and Stacy will be back at 8:30 for a new best ball draft. No pun intended, we'll be covering, who are we covering this week? It's going to be the Patriots, the Chargers, and the Giants on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Myself, Ryan, Joe Zola will be back, and special guest Andrew Cooper will be joining the show to talk those 3 teams. Mock It Like It's Hot will be back on Saturday morning, and of course, Dynasty After Party here, hopefully with Sicoli back with Joel. If not, no, I can fill in, I guess, if I need to.
Well, we appreciate it.
Always and always. All right. I don't really know. Oh, okay, here we go. Remember, Dynasty is like a disco ball. It keeps on spinning year round. So join the club as, again, Dynasty After Party here every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. Joel, for myself, at the Joel Wirth, at the One Hudsonian. Peace out. We will see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.